Hey, this is Josh for Retooled.net, and in this video I'm going to talk about doing speed changes in Premiere Pro versus doing speed changes in Final Cut 7. Now, there are a lot of things that are very similar between the two programs, and then there are a few things that are different as well. So I hope to quickly cover them and just show you how speed changes work in both programs and how you could adapt to Premiere's way of working if you're coming from Final Cut. So I'm just going to hop on over to Final Cut and hit play. I have this clip here, and it was actually shot in slow motion, so it's shot at a very high frame rate. So we have all these nice clean frames in slow motion of the cork flying off the champagne bottle. Alright, so if I wanted to do any sort of speed changes with that, the easiest way to do that in Final Cut is to select your clip and hit Command J. And there I get the change speed dialog. So it tells you the current duration is 5713 and the rate right now is at 100%. There are also different levels of smoothing and things like that. And you also get the choice of whether you want to ripple your sequence, whether you want frame blending on, and scale attributes. So let me just show you what it would do if I were to type in 50% here, hit OK. And because I had the option ripple sequence on, you'll notice the clip did get longer. So if I come to right before the bottle is popped and I hit play, you'll see it has been slowed down, and there is also frame blending on. So if I pause on any one of these frames, you'll see that every other frame is a blended frame because it is a 50% speed change. So if I zoom in, might make it a little bit easier for you guys to see that. And there you go, there's your blended frame between the two regular frames. Okay, so that is a basic speed change in Final Cut. And the same way I could come in here and hit Command J again, I could make it a reverse speed change, or of course I could do something like speed it up. So if I type in 400% and hit OK, you'll notice it's playing at more of a real-time kind of speed right now. And if I go back to the cork flying out, alright, great. So you get the point. Now that is how you do a simple speed change, non-variable speed change in Final Cut Pro. So if I go over to Premiere, it's basically the same workflow. The default keyboard shortcut is different. So if I hit Command R, and this is the default Premiere Pro shortcuts, obviously if you're in the Final Cut shortcuts, it would probably be the same. So if I come in here, and you'll see a similar dialog, it's called the clip speed duration dialog. And you get a speed of 100% by default, of course, and it tells you the current duration. So I could also select reverse speed, and I can also select ripple edit or shift trailing clips, which is basically the same thing as rippling the sequence in Final Cut. Now, one additional feature, which is really nice, is the ability, if this clip were to have audio, I could maintain the audio pitch. And Premiere Pro does a pretty decent job of doing this. It's not as good as, say, Audition or Pro Tools would do, but it's a lot better than having to manually put a pitch shift on there and figure out the speed. So anyway, if I do the same thing, I'll go to 50%, hit OK, and you'll notice it made the clip longer as well. So if I come to this similar portion of the clip and I hit play, now if I step through the frames, you'll notice every other frame is a hold frame. And that's because in Premiere Pro the default is not to have frame blending on. So of course I can turn that on here as well. So if I go over to the clip menu, video options, and I turn on frame blend, I'll get the similar type of frame blending in Premiere. And of course there's another way to do that as well, so I'll just undo that, and if I right click on the clip and just select frame blend, it'll enable it here, and you can see it enabled blending on that clip, and you can see the blended frame right now. So if I hit play, there's the same action. Now to my eye, the blending in Premiere seems a little less distracting to me than it does in Final Cut, but it's still not a real pixel motion sort of frame blending like you would see in After Effects or you have in Final Cut X, for instance. But I'll get into how you can do that a little bit later. Now, there is also advanced speed changes or variable speed changes in both programs as well. So if I come into Final Cut and hit Command J, I can just remove the speed change that's on this one. And if I come on over here, come over to the motion tab of the clip, you'll see I have this speed diagram. So I could just come and scrub the clip till when I want the speed to change. Let's say I want it slow motion till right around here, and I could then set a keyframe, and then I could come a little bit further and say, okay, I want the speed to be increased for that small section. And basically a 45-degree line is 100%, and anything steeper than that is faster, and anything less steep than that is slower. And then of course if you were to drag something negative, that would be a reverse speed change. So if I come here, basically what should happen is it should be 100% speed, which in this case is a slow motion clip already. Then it should start going very fast right there, and then it should slow down to slower than original speed. So that's how you do that in Final Cut. If I come over to Premiere, it's a different system. So again, I'm just going to hit Command R, and I'm going to set that back to 100% and hit OK. So now the clip is back to normal. If I want to do a variable speed change in Premiere, there's a different way to do it. So first thing I want to do is come on over to the track that my clip is on, and I want to tell it I want to show keyframes. Now this will look slightly different in Premiere CC, but the process is more or less the same. So if I just go to show keyframes, you'll notice this little rubber band showed up, but it says opacity. And I don't want to keyframe my opacity, I want to keyframe my time remapping. So if I click right here, I'll just click on time remapping and select speed. So now this line represents my speed change of time remapping, and basically it works from top to bottom, and this middle grade line here means 100% speed. So if I select it, you'll notice it's playing at its 100% speed, which was actually slow motion to begin with. So if I want to make a keyframe, I could come in here, I could use either the arrow tool or the pen tool. If I'm on the arrow tool, I could hit Command right here and make a keyframe. So let's say I want to be going slow motion up until that point, and then at that point I want it to speed up. So I could just come after that keyframe and drag this line higher, and you'll notice the percentage is growing, and I have a line showing me that my clip is going to be shrinking because I'm making the clip faster. It's not going to be quite as long anymore. So let's go with something very noticeable, say around 500% or so. Alright, so if I come in here and I hit play, it will be 100%, or slow motion in this case, and then it'll start going much faster. So it approaches a lot closer to real time in this case. But let's say I want that change to happen a little later or more gradually. I can zoom in, I can move that keyframe, and you'll notice what happens there. If I move it, it will actually split by default. And what that does is it lets you set the interpolation between the keyframes, which means it's going to go from 100% here to around 500% here, but it'll do it gradually over the period between these keyframes. Now I could even come in here, and you'll notice that I get a handle, and I can make a Bezier shape to control how this happens. So basically it will be going at 100%, and then in here it'll quickly ramp up, and then right toward the end it'll get a little slower in its ramp and then stay at 500. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, cool. So basically you could see I could set that, and if I want I could come in here, hit Command again, and then I can make another keyframe and then bring it back to something like 100%. Alright, so right there, and then again I can make a ramp here to control that. So it'll be going 500 and then slowly head back to 100%. Great. Now I could even do things like reversing the speed here. So let me show you how that works. I'm just going to delete these keyframes for now, just to make the example a little clearer. So let's say I want the cork to fly out, and then I want to see the whole thing again. So I could hit Command to make a keyframe here, and then if I hold Command and drag the keyframe to the right, you'll notice I get this separate icon here, and you'll notice that in my program monitor I have two frames. The one on the left is the frame where I started the freeze frame, and the one on the right is how far back I want to go in reverse time. So basically let's just go back to right before the cap comes out. Alright, right there, and if I hit play, So you'll notice it goes at normal speed, then reverses till it comes back in, and then it flies back out. So you can see how I can do variable speed changes in here. Now, as I mentioned before, Premiere doesn't have any kind of actual pixel motion or really advanced frame blending like a Twixtor built into it. But what you can do is send it to After Effects for that kind of action. So I'm just going to undo these variable speed changes, even though I could use these as well. I'm just going to use the simple example of coming in here, and I'm going to make this clip a lot slower. So if I hit Command R, I could type in something like 20%. And I did 20% just to make it really obvious how stuttery this is. And to make it even more obvious, actually, I'm going to shut off frame blending, just so you can see how stuttery this will become. So if I come over here, you'll notice it's really choppy. So I want to give it the After Effects treatment. So what do? First thing I do before I ever send any clips over to After Effects is to duplicate them in my timeline. So I'm going to hold down Option, drag up, let go, and there's my duplicate clip. And now I want to send this duplicate over to After Effects. I like to keep the original clip below it in case I need to go back or need the correct information to go through in an XML or an EDL. I don't want to lose that going to After Effects. So if I right click and hit Replace with After Effects Composition, going to open up After Effects, and it's going to ask me where I want it to save. So it'll open up my After Effects project, and I'll just create a new project for this. Let me just type in the name here, and I will just do it to my desktop, slow motion. Okay, great. So let me just reset my After Effects window so you guys can see the whole thing, and I will just go back to the standard view here. So I have my workspace, and all I need to do is come in here and turn on the frame blending switch, and doing it once would do frame blending, doing it twice would do pixel motion. And then I need to enable it for my comp as well by clicking here. And now if I come, and I'm just going to go to the point where the cap comes out, so right around here, and I'm just going to preview this small area by hitting 0 on my numeric pad. Alright, so let me just come in here, and I'm just going to fit this to the window so you guys can see the whole thing. Now if you're watching that process, you'll notice there are some artifacts in there, but let's just see what it looks like in motion. And there are definitely some weird artifacts in here, so you'd need to play around, and that goes for any sort of frame blending method like Twixtor. You tend to get artifacts with really fast motion. But if you look at the sort of steam here, you notice that has a much smoother feel to it. So it's something that you could definitely play around with and get some really nice results, but of course it does take work, and you're never going to get frames perfect that weren't there when you shot it. So that is a great reason to shoot something in super slow motion like this was shot. Now of course if I want that result back in Premiere, I can just hit save and pop back to Premiere. Hitting save is actually an unnecessary step, but if I come over here and just hit play, you'll notice I have my frame blended result right back in my timeline. Now, one last thing I'd like to discuss before leaving the topic of speed changes is how to do frame holds or freeze frames in both programs. So I'm just going to go back to the original clip, and I'm going to delete the After Effects link, and I'm going to hit Command R, bring it back to 100%. Hit OK. So if I hop back over to Final Cut, you'll see that I have my original clip, and same thing here. I'm just going to hit Command J, hit remove speed, and hit OK. Now if I wanted to make a freeze frame, and let's just come to a nice frame like this, and I wanted to do that in Final Cut, there's a very easy way of doing this, and I actually prefer Final Cut's method here. So if I want to do it from the timeline, I can do that, which means if I have multiple layers composited, it will make a freeze frame of all those layers. But if I just want to do it of my original source clip with nothing else, I can hit F to do a match frame, and then if I hit Shift N on my keyboard, that creates a freeze frame. And the cool thing here is it's a metadata based freeze frame, which means I can just drag it in here, and if I were to say render over this source clip, the freeze frame would update because it's based on the metadata of linking back to this original clip. Now the other cool thing here is that I can then extend it to infinite length, even if it's beyond the length of my original clip. Now, let me show you how to do this in Premiere. So if I come over in Premiere, and I'm just going to tell it to hide keyframes for now, and let's say I come to the frame I want to do a freeze frame on. So let's say it's right here. Now, there are two ways to do it. One is to export an actual image. So I could click on this that says export frame, or hit Shift E on my keyboard. And same thing here, I could either do it out of the timeline by doing it that way, or I could hit F and do a match frame. And if I were to enable the same button in the source monitor, I could do it from there as well, or I could hit Shift E and do it from there as well. And then I can export that still and bring it back into my project. And in that case, I'd be able to drag it to any length I need. Now, the cool thing in Premiere CC is there's a little checkbox that you would see that would say import into project, I believe, and that would just bring that still frame right back into your project so you can bring it into your timeline. So that is one way you can export a still or save a still frame in Premiere, and it's really nice if you want to just export a still and get it out of Premiere. So if a client wants to make a storyboard out of your rough cut, you can do that. But the other way to do it is right in the timeline. So the way that works is it's marker based. So I could come over here and I can add a clip marker. So I could either do that in the source monitor, or if I go to my keyboard shortcuts, Premiere Pro keyboard shortcuts, and I search for the term clip marker, you can set a shortcut for add clip marker. So I could do something like Control M and hit OK, and then if I come in here and hit Control M, it will make a clip marker. So you can see it right there. So the thing you have to do though, because I could have multiple clip markers, and I could have one here as well, is name your marker. And it works on the marker named 0. So if I come up into the source monitor, hit Command Shift M to go to my previous marker, Shift M would go to my next marker, and then if I just double click on my marker, it will ask me what I want to name it. If I hit 0 and hit OK, and then I come over, I'm just going to go to another frame to show you that it's actually selecting this frame here, and right click, and then I go to frame hold, and instead of hold on in point or out point, which are also options you can hold based on the first or last frame of the clip, I'm going to hit marker 0 and hit OK, and you'll notice now it's this same frame right here, and it's not going to pick from this frame. So one caveat here is if you were to launch the Windows and you were to go to the markers window, I'll just dock that in my interface and I'll make sure I'm on this source clip. You'll notice that I don't have the name 0 on this marker or any name here either. And that's because in the marker window you're seeing the marker descriptions and not the marker name. So you have to be sure to actually enter your marker by double clicking on it, and then you could make sure the actual name of the marker is 0. So that's just an important step. And again, the one issue with this sort of workflow is that I am limited to the original length of my clip. I guess in theory I could come in here and hit Command R and put a speed change on there as well and make it something like 1%, and that will kind of make my clip a lot longer, so I have a lot more room to stretch it out to any duration I need. So that's the best workaround you have out there. And now you'll notice my original clip is now an hour and 45 minutes long, which should be plenty long for any still frame. So that would be the workaround I would use if you want to make your still frame longer than your original clip. I hope this gives you guys a good idea of how speed changes work in Premiere so that you could do your own speed changes, whether they're slowdowns or speed ups successfully.